Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. This video is, well, a little different than I had originally planned it. One, there were originally going to be 3 books. 2, this was meant to be a quick and zippy video. About 10 minutes per book. Not happening. 3, this was originally going to be a voiceover with makeup type video instead of just sitting here and chatting to you like this. However, with the books that I am covering here, I wanted to go into detail with them. In one case, it is here, TikTok actually might be onto something. And in the second case, it's TikTok lied to you. This isn't a book to recommend to anybody. 2, as you may be able to slightly detect in the latter part of point 1, I got really heated reading one of these books. That was why I wasn't having it be quick and zippy. I needed to go into detail. 3, one of these books doesn't deserve a makeup look. You might be able to tell that by now. I don't think it's good enough to deserve one. And the other book, it didn't feel quite right to me to sit and do all my makeup and do a little voiceover and try and find something that felt fitting while talking about that book, because it's quite a serious book. So I thought instead I would just sit and talk about it like I am doing now. Just didn't feel tasteful, you know? Now, like I said, one of these books is quite serious, so right out of the gate, I want to give some content / trigger warnings. I will also, if I remember in editing, because I know what I'm like, I will also put timestamps for the second book, where the only content warning I have for that is that I will be discussing some not safe for work content, but it's all consensual stuff, right? It's just adult content. Some people don't want to listen to talking about that. Some people are fine with it. But the second book should be a bit more light-hearted. So if you want to skip to that, I should remember to put the timestamp here. And if not, if you do see any of these trigger warnings and just think, you know what, I want to skip out of this, that's fine. I completely understand. Me getting a few extra views is not worth you losing sleep over. It's not worth you damaging any mental health problems that you have. So, like I said, we do have just some general not safe for work sexual content, all consensual, but that is just a general little content thing there. Some people don't want to listen to that. Now, the erring more on the side of trigger warnings, we have mentions of domestic abuse, sexual assault and rape, and I know that is something that a lot of people cannot or will not listen to anything about, and that's absolutely fine. So like I said, you're more than welcome to check out right now. Now, to bring the mood up a little bit before diving in, today we will be talking about why TikTok can't be trusted to give you recommendations. On the one hand, I have a book which was genuinely really bloody good, a possible favourite, and on the other hand, there's one which I wanted to throw into the sea. Apparently, the author of the book that I did like, apparently she's quite controversial. I don't know if she's a controversial figure, but her writing is quite hit or miss with some people. But with this book in particular, I legitimately really enjoyed it. Like I said, can't speak for the rest of her writing, but I can for this one. So I'm going to start with the serious review, talking about Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us. I think that's the right thing to do. Start serious and then get some levity towards the end. And with that levity, I will be laughing at, not with, The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. Oh, and spoilers throughout, because I'm going to be diving into these books. This isn't going to be my usual kind of broad reviews. These are going to be in-depth reviews, so spoilers if that's also something that bothers you. Now, I know you will have just seen all those warnings, but this is your final reminder that it's in this book where sort of this book is the reason that a lot of those warnings take place. So just a reminder, if you don't want to watch this, there is a second part which is a lot more fun, or you're more than welcome to just not watch this video. There will be plenty more to come in the future that don't deal with these topics. Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us is a book that is really not what it seems on the surface, you know, when you first read the blurb. It seems like a fairly standard, an old flame, that first love has returned and will maybe stir up some trouble in your current relationship. But once you start delving in, it becomes apparent that this is actually a book about the cycles of abuse and how best to break those cycles. I don't think how best to break them is quite the right phrasing there, but breaking the cycles of abuse, that's what this book is about. And also exploring perhaps some of the reasons why people remain in abusive relationships. Cat, you can come in. I know you can open the door. Are you coming to say hi? Are you going to help me film? We okay? I don't know if they'll be able to see you. Scoop her up like a baby. This is a book that doesn't shy away from its subject matter while still giving it the respect it deserves and dealing with it with the tact it deserves as well. I, in this review, will try to do the same thing, and I will look for some helplines, website links, that kind of thing, and I will put them in the description. It feels like the least I can do. Okay, I think the shot might be slightly different, but I think she's jumped up there without causing too much problems. There. Right. I think I should be fine. I think she's been good. She's a good cat. This is a book that starts as it means to continue. The opening line is abrasive, and it feels like an almost, if you are uncomfortable at this first moment, find something else to read. It starts as it means to continue. Now, while the opening line is not to do with the majority of the subject matter of the rest of the book, it is still tied into that. It's about her feeling incredibly emotional and rough after losing her father, but the sadness doesn't come from his loss. It's more a million emotions coming from losing a man who was objectively quite cruel to her mother, and also the fact that she had a very strange moment when she was trying to deliver his eulogy. And honestly, yeah, I was roped into this book quite quickly. I quite liked that being taken aback, but I wasn't still 100% sure when I first went in. Now, I'll be totally honest, I went into this, like I said in that initial bit of a description, I thought this was kind of going to be a traditional romance type novel, maybe with a bit more drama to it, but when I read lines like this, I I was having this little feeling here of going, oh no, please don't be like this for the rest of the book. I'm 23. I've been through college and have done this recreational drug a time or two. That line didn't even really sound human, never mind that of somebody who's 23. But those sorts of lines didn't pop up throughout the rest of the book. It was just it was a one-off early on, something that frankly just should have been edited differently. But I will be honest, I did forget that she was meant to be in her early 20s until I went back through my notes and found that line again. She doesn't seem a lot older, but I would have put her closer to the end of her 20s and more in her early 30s, just generally the way she carries herself. Like, you know, she seems a bit older, but you're probably not going to be thinking about it for the rest of the book. Maybe you'll think about it once or twice if it does come up and I just didn't clock it, but it's never something that you're consciously really thinking about. When Lily, our main character, was a teenager, she kept a diary about her life that pertained mostly to her first relationship with a homeless boy called Atlas, and also detailing a lot of the abuse that she witnessed from her father to her mother. These diary entries take form of sort of unsent letters to Ellen DeGeneres. I wasn't a fan of that at first, I'll be totally honest. It felt... I don't like using a phrase like this, but it felt a little bit try-hard. It just stuck out a bit much, like you're trying to be a bit unique. But it is something that I warmed to later on, and I do like how it's used elsewhere with the sort of adult Lily and Atlas, the way they interact over Ellen, because they watched it when they were teenagers. He became a part of her love for watching Ellen. Also, when Atlas as an adult shows up later on for the first time, I was a bit confused because they're both from this tiny little town in Maine. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. It's got like a kind of Puritan sounding name, like it's called like Patience or something like that, one of those type places. They bump into each other in a restaurant. Turns out that it's actually Atlas's, but it felt a little contrived before we saw the diary entries, and then those diary entries really helped out. There is a fly that's buzzing around and I'm gonna get it. Go away. Piss off. You know, the diaries really brought the perspective into it, and then it didn't feel quite as contrived anymore. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, it still could be a little bit, oh, and then we explained it afterwards, but it still felt like it all fit together. The diaries didn't end up making it feel more contrived, thankfully less. Like I said earlier, I really did just think this was a romance book at first, and you can tell in my early notes. I'd say I got about a third of the way in when I started to have this, oh, something might be wrong here in her relationship as an adult. The first time you actually see a direct act of abuse is about halfway through, so it is a little later than that, but I started having a is something wrong here a bit earlier than that, and I probably wasn't, I was contemplating whether or not to mention this critique, because it's sort of doesn't really matter in the long run, but I want to talk about the structure of this book overall and how the structure of the book itself reflects the type of relationships that it's talking about. You are lured in with this book. So when I was still critiquing it like a regular romance, I was making notes like this, not clocking other things that were probably going on in the background. So I will be reading directly from my script here because I want to make sure that I read it right. I know what she means when she talks about his joggers barely hanging to his hips, but I just don't think it works. He's meant to be all big and buff, but that description makes him sound so scrawny. It's just a common romance thing and it never sounds right. I also feel like I missed a bit of the notes there because I swear I also wrote, just say they're hanging low on his hips. So yeah, I made notes like that, like I would for critiquing any other romance book. And I was contemplating leaving it in because in the grand scheme of reviewing this book, lines like that are kind of inconsequential. It's that fly that was buzzing earlier, so I wasn't, but the reason I want to bring that up is because I was focusing on things like that and I wasn't looking at any signs that something might be wrong. And it is brought up later in the book, but the very first time you see Ryle, who is her partner as an adult, the abusive partner, the first time you see him, he is incredibly aggressive. Not towards her, but he's taking his anger out in a really aggressive kind of way. And while that's not in and of itself a complete problem, it's one of many little signs that you don't see early on until it's a bit too late. The point where I started actually thinking, oh, is there something wrong with Lily and Ryle's relationship was during a moment in one of her teenage diary entries. So we have young teenage Lily who has seen her father violently attacking her mother. She tries to intervene, ends up getting pushed and badly hitting her head. That does come up later, by the way, because there's a reflection with that I noticed. Actually, because it's me and I will probably forget to mention it. Basically, the first time that Ryle hurts Lily, he also pushes her and she hits her head, and I thought there was something in that again, because we're talking about cycles here. But yeah, her dad pushes her, she hits her head, and it's just her and her mum driving to the hospital, and she gives a lie to Lily. I believe she tells her to tell the doctors that she slipped on some ice, and after that we get this in the diary. When she said that, I just looked out of my window and started crying, because I thought for sure this was the final straw, that she would leave him now that he had hurt me. That was the moment I realised that she'd never leave him. And that moment came back to me a little bit after we first meet adult Atlas. It just made me go, no. It's where I started first thinking cycles are going to start occurring, because there was something, I couldn't tell you what it was, but there was something, this feeling I started getting about Ryle when we first met Atlas that I couldn't put my finger on, but my brain went to, he's going to get jealous. And with maybe thinking, oh, is he a jealous type? Thinking about how that could escalate, and I don't know why that stuck in my head, but I went back to that moment and it was just shite. That's what this book's going to be about. And that it was. Side note, by the way, just to take a breather before we get into where this starts to get heavier, and that I'm not really going to have any moments of levity going forward. Not in this half of the video anyway. The names in this book are a bit shit. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know how else to say this. They sound like fictional names. And yes, I know I'm reading fiction, but I don't want to feel reminded of that. Our main character, she's called Lily Bloom. I believe her middle name is also somehow linked to flowers. I can't quite remember, and I know someone with the surname Bloom might then go, oh, let's give our child a floral name, but Lily Bloom sounds like a fictional character. She doesn't sound like she could be real, and it feels too whimsical for this book, right? And then her first love is called Atlas. But the worst contender is her partner as an adult, Ryle. He's called Ryle Kincaid. I can deal with the Kincaid. That's just an unusual surname, not one that I've come across. Ryle? Kyle with an R? I mean, not to lower the tone, but the name's a red flag in itself. And when I was writing the script, I was like, why does that name sound familiar? And I'm glad I only remembered this after reading the book, but when I was talking about the fact that the names are kind of red flags, I was like, oh my god, who does that remind me of? Why is Ryle? Have I heard that name before? And I haven't, obviously, but the name I have heard before is Lyle, and I was thinking of Lyle Vandergroot from the 2 George of the Jungle films. He's the antagonist of the George of the Jungle movies, which I watched so much as a kid. And I'm just really, like I said, I'm really glad that I wasn't thinking of him throughout that, actually reading the book, because I can't lower the tone reading a book like that. But it was all I could think of writing the rest of that script, that because I'd remembered his name. So yeah, the names in this are a little bit atrocious. However, I can't remember if Ryle came from a rich family or that his sister married rich. I'm pretty sure they came from a rich family, because I'm pretty sure his father was also a pretty successful doctor. And I wouldn't put it past rich people to call their child fucking Ryle. Anyway, I don't know how I'm going to segue this back into the video, because it doesn't feel right, because I know what I'm about to talk about next. I chose a side note at the wrong point there, but you know what? We'll put a little be right back screen here. Give ourselves like 5 seconds, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the book. So, the first time Ryle hurts Lily, it does feel weird also. I'm sorry, I know we're like meant to be moving away from that side note, but the fact that the lead character shares a name with my cat really doesn't help. But she's Lily like the flower, and my cat's Lily like Lilith the demon. So, bit different, which is ironic because she's the perfect angel, and my other cat Zelda is a menace to society and bites me. The reason my hand's all fucked up because I slightly made her jump picking her up the other day, and she like freaked out and got me. Anyway, the first time he hurts her, it's not something that looks like abuse. So he's pulling, they're both really, really drunk. She's sat on the countertop. He's pulling a casserole that's out the oven because they've kind of forgotten about it, and it's all this bit of a panic. He pulls it out. He's not got oven gloves on or like a towel or anything like that, and he pulls it out, burns his hand obviously. And he's freaked out. He is a neurosurgeon. His hands are his job. And she, pissed as she is, laughs. Not because of his hands, but because the situation is silly. But she gets off the counter and he strikes her. She falls, hits her head, like I said, reflecting that thing earlier. She hits her head, and I believe she hits her eye on a like one of the doorknobs on one of the cabinets. Now, it's a moment that feels like it could happen once and never again. They're both very drunk. It could be heat of the moment. With the right apologies and steps taken, it could be the sort of thing that happens once in their relationship and never again. But the reason you can tell that this would not be a one-time occurrence is because of the way that Ryle reacts. He does not say sorry. He acts apologetically, but he is not apologizing. He is repeating himself over and over again, but he's not going, "I'm sorry." He is saying, "Please don't hate me." The focus is not on his actions or on his victim. His focus is on himself. It's not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." It is, "Please don't hate me. I know I fucked up. Don't hate me, don't hate me, don't hate me." That is not an apology. That's somebody who knows they're about to lose what they've got and is going, "Oh please, I'm sorry." They'll do it again. Guaranteed, if they act like that, they'll do some shit again. Now, a day or two after this, once they're a bit healed up but not completely, they've obviously both got a matching mark on his hand, if you will, a matching mark on his hand and her face, and they are back at the restaurant which Atlas runs, and he sees this and he confronts, from want of a better phrase, he confronts Lily about it, and she's very defensive, as you might imagine. And she confesses later on, but it's quite clear at the time that she knows he's right, that he is capable of doing something like that again, and this is the moment where she should get out. But she's being defensive, not wanting it to be true, because she doesn't want to believe that she could end up in a relationship like her parents' relationship, because she spent a long time resenting her mother for not leaving, because she didn't understand the reasons why people remain in relationships like that. And this sort of thing is really common, that outside perspective coming in saying, "Look what's happening here," but people inside the sort of bubble have a kind of, "You're not in this, you don't understand." But there is something to be said for people outside being able to look in with a sense of almost disconnect in a way that the people within the relationship can't. And I think this moment with Atlas, where he confronts her, is a really good portrayal of that. And as the reader, you have this very strange mix of where you are with this story. You are both very much with Lily from the outset, but at the same time, you are an observer, you are outside. And, on that first occasion, you might still have that, but it was an accident, or it was a heat of the moment thing with everybody being drunk. But I think the second time something happens in this story, it becomes a lot clearer of what's really going on here. So the second time it happens, he has found all of the diaries with her talking about Atlas. He's confronting her about it. He's really in her face. He's getting really aggressive. And she's desperately trying to explain to him, yes, I have these diaries because he was a huge part of my life. I was a teenager and he was a huge part of my life when I was going through some of the worst shit I've ever been through. But he's not letting her get to that point. That doesn't come until much later, at the point where she's, you know, making sure they have this separation. I think it's before they get divorced, because they do get married at one point. And he walks out, she tries to talk, like walks out of the apartment. She tries to talk to him to like get those answers to him. They're on the stairs and he pushes her down, objectively pushes her down the stairs. But when she wakes up, he is helping her, least he can fucking do, tending to her, trying to make sure she's not concussed. And then what he does is he tells her that she fell. Now she repeatedly is very certain in the fact that, no, you pushed me. And he keeps going, no, you fell, no, you fell. And she starts questioning that. Real gaslighting, not internet Twitter gaslighting, where it's just, you know, lying. He is intentionally trying to make her question what she believes to be true and real. She is questioning her own reality. She is so certain, and because she knows she might be concussed, it makes the gaslighting way easier. And it takes him months to admit that he actually did push her. I believe it is in that moment, no matter how you felt the first time that he hurt her, that is where you go, this is a relationship that cannot be sustained. Phrasing this next bit is going to be a little bit tricky, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from and what I mean by this. This is one of very few pieces of media where there are explicit depictions of both rape and sexual assault, where it does not feel unnecessary or exploitative. Now, of course, these two scenes are still incredibly difficult to read, but from my point of view, they are still handled very tactfully, or as tactfully as you can do with scenes like this. Far too many pieces of media rely on violent sexual scenes in order to create unnecessary shock or to create some kind of character development. It all feels a bit cheap sometimes, but that's definitely not the case here. As hard as they are to read, this is a book about domestic abuse. All forms of abuse are about one person making sure that they have dominance over somebody else. And it is about claiming power no matter what. And actions like those forms of assault are exclusively to do with power. It's also right, I think, to mention that Colleen Hoover focuses on the right person. The focus here is on the victim, especially during the scene with Lily. So there are two scenes. One where Lily is a witness to her mother being raped by her father, and she's set to do something about it. She's about to try and intervene, and Atlas stops her because she's likely to cause great physical harm, if not to try to take out, as it were, her father. And in the second scene, it is her own partner attempting to rape her. And in both of these scenes, the focus is more towards the victim. In the first case, it is Lily focusing more on her mother, with some description of just the act itself. Obviously, the focus is taken a little bit away because it's on her emotions about it, her being the main character, but descriptively the focus is on her mother, and in her assault the focus is on her. Both cases it is on the victim, not on the perpetrator. But like I said, in this book they do not feel out of place and they're handled as tactfully as they can be. After this particular moment with her and Ryle, he leaves to England for, I think it's 6 weeks to 2 months. I think they say 2 months when they're talking about it, but I'm pretty sure elsewhere it says 6 weeks, but I will say 2 months for ease. And basically Lily realizes that she is at the point where she needs to talk to somebody closer to the situation, so she turns to Ryle's sister. Those two are very close friends. She works for Lily. They call each other best friends sometimes, which feels a bit odd because they're both grown adults, but like I said, she goes to talk to her. The first half of her response had me worried. It was along the lines of, he's my brother, I know that he loves you, you've changed his life. And I was like, red flags going off and like alarm bells, all this. I was worried and I made a note really quickly and then continued reading and was like, okay, we're all right. And I can't remember the exact line, but it's something along the lines of, you know, she says, as his sister, I know he loves you and you've changed his life, but as your best friend, if you ever go back to him, you will never see me again, or something like that. It's a bit like a, you can't go back to him as your friend. Do not ever go back to this man. It doesn't matter that he's my brother. And that was actually quite refreshing. I was half expecting a kind of blood is thicker than water kind of moment here, and I'm really glad I didn't get that. It is rare that I talk out loud to a book while I'm reading it, but when Ryle, all I can think of is Swoop saying when he had the whole grain audacity, when he had the audacity to say, you have no idea what I've been through these past 2 months, knowing what I did to you. I was seething. And I was sat there looking at it, muttering to myself, going, how do you feel? How do you feel? How do you fucking think she feels? Now that's not exactly what I said, nor is it exactly what I wrote in my notes, but I've already used a lot of bad language or generally not favoured by the algorithm type language, but it might have begun with a C, what I called him on repeat, because that's exactly what he is. And I was just going for that over and over again, and I'm really glad that Lily hits him back with pretty much exactly that. She didn't drop a C-bomb, but going for that, what do you mean how you felt? Why do you care how you felt? I was the one that was attacked, so how do you think I felt? You know, she's sat there like dealing with everything that he's done to her. Also, she's pregnant from a consensual night, by the way. She's got a baby consensually kind of thing, right? I feel like that's worth pointing out. But, you know, that's what I meant earlier on when he first hits her and says, don't hate me, don't hate me, don't hate me. And then at this moment says, do you have any idea how I felt knowing what I did to you? I told you earlier on that this is the kind of man he is. His focus is always going to be on himself. And he says that early in the book. I only have one night stands because I don't want to have to focus on somebody else, and that should have been a sign. But you don't think about it because you're madly into somebody and you sort of wave some things off. It's not too long after this conversation with Ryle that Lily has a very difficult but much needed conversation with her mother. This is a very difficult scene to read, but not in a way that a lot of the rest of the book is. It's difficult because it's sort of everybody confronting things head on. It's a very raw kind of scene. It's that kind of shedding a lot that's been held over the two of them for a long time and getting out a lot of things that have remained unsaid. When her mum starts talking about limits in abusive relationships, it's heart-wrenching, but it feels like a deeply necessary scene. It's a very eloquent way of delving a little bit into that kind of why do people remain with or go back to abusive partners. I mean, obviously partly it is that very simple loving them or loving the part of them that isn't outwardly abusive, but as Lily's mother explains, there's a lot to do with the limits you have of what you're willing to accept in a relationship, and how when you're in an abusive relationship, those limits get stretched very thin over time. Do we have another cat in here? Hello? You can come in if you like. We have a very rare moment where I am being allowed to hold a Lily. She does not usually let me do this. You can sit down for a bit. She's usually a bit more reluctant to let me hold. But this is quite nice. Oh, Zelda's on her way down. Please don't hit the... Yep, there you go. We aren't like I said, we aren't going to get many light interludes in this one, so I think bringing the cats into it might be quite nice. You better watch that tripod, missus. I mean it. Miss Zelda. Yes, you do. So her mother talks about when the first time her husband, Lily's father, hit her, he was incredibly apologetic, promising that it would never happen again. And those apologies happened one or two times after that, but then they start appearing less and less and less until they just stop appearing altogether. And then, you know, she's talking about not only the fact that being hit happens more frequently, but also the kind of level of violence increases. So slaps turn to all-out beatings, and she talks about how once she's been beaten more often than not, and he returns to just slapping her, she had this guilty sense of relief where in the back of her head she's like, well, he only slapped me, at least it wasn't a beating. And you know, while those limits are being stretched, time is passing by, and she talks about how eventually she finds herself going, well, I've put up with this for 5 years already, what's another 5 years? And it's hard to explain, but it's a scene that gives this sense of release for both the characters involved, but also for the reader. I think, you know, everybody gets to this point of understanding. Obviously, this isn't going to be the answer for a lot of people, but like I said, it is an exploration as to why some people, at least, do remain within physically abusive relationships. Like I mentioned earlier, at some point Lily discovers that she is pregnant. Now, later on, they obviously have to start discussing what's gonna happen once the baby's born, and for me, I find all of it quite confusing. I don't know if this is just I'm not a parent, so I don't really get where anybody's coming from, but they have a discussion about Ryle remaining in the baby's life. Now, if it were me, I'd rather my baby have no father than a potentially abusive one, but like I said, I'm not a parent, I'm not in that situation, so I don't know how I'd react. And at least Lily discusses the fact that she does think, or that she does have these nerves about it. Once the baby's born, you discover that he gets unsupervised visits. Actually, not even visits, he gets to just like have her for, I think it's like 1 day a week or something. And that really confuses me. I would understand supervised visits. He gets to see her with, say, like a social worker or something like that present to make sure that everything's safe. Because she even talks about the fact that, yeah, plenty of people are abusive to partners, but not their kids. But the kind of volatile he is doesn't sound safe to be around anybody. But like I said, I'm not a parent. But like I said, I'm not a parent, so maybe this is just one of those things I just don't understand. I will say, her popping a baby out, getting to hold the baby for the first time and turning to him going, by the way, we're getting a divorce. Beautiful. We love the way that post-birth clarity washes over her. Also, then there's this following little like bit where she's talking to him about the reason for getting a divorce, and she's like, you know, he's holding the baby at this point as well, where it's like, if that little girl said, Daddy, my partner's just hit me, what would you say to her? But she like phrases it in the, like, she basically, if my partner did, and she recounts exactly the moments that he's done to her. And it's a very powerful little bit, but it then plays on the, and yet you're going to let him have unsupervised visits. But again, it is what it is. Maybe it's just me. I think in terms of the book itself, I will leave you with this line from towards the end of the book. We break the pattern before it breaks us. And I think that sums up quite nicely what Colleen Hoover aimed to do with this book and achieved it really well. Now, I'll be honest, I often don't read author's notes, acknowledgements, things like that. I'm generally a just get to the book kind of person. And once I've finished the book itself, I'm probably not reading on afterwards, but I did in this case. I was just sort of curious. Because it wasn't a particularly long author's note, I figured might as well. And she talks of how she spent, this is Colleen Hoover, talks about how she spent her young childhood in a home where physical abuse was present, while her and her sister were never hit. Like with Lily, her father would abuse her mother. Now, her mother managed to get out, but, you know, her recalling this and basically saying, this book is for my mother and women like her, it's really clear throughout the book that there is passion and care that went into it. and that she has really, for want of a better phrase, she's really taken her time over this. You know, it's very clear that this story is something that comes from the heart, that shows throughout the novel. Now, I don't know what her other writing is like. I've heard decidedly mixed reviews about it, and not even in any kind of, some people quite like it, some people don't. It's one of those kind of hardball, people love her writing, people hate her writing kind of thing. But I can't talk about any of her other books because I haven't read them. However, if you have seen TikToks telling you to read any of her books, believe them on this one, because it is genuinely bloody brilliant. You know, I understand how difficult this book might be because of the issues raised, but as far as I can see, it is a subject broached with care and sensitivity. Now, we've had a delve into something quite dark and harsh. Shall we lower the tone a little bit? Does that sound good to you? It sounds good to me. I fancy lowering the tone. Are you gonna help? Are you gonna help me film the first part of the video? Well, not the first part, the last part. It's been a long day. We've had to write this whole script pretty much today, haven't we? And you've helped. She has. She's helped very much. Okay. Oh, bollocks, that's the blinds. Alright. Where do you want to go? So I can go and sort the blinds out. Where does you want to go? You don't want to go anywhere, do you? Go on. Okay, last part of the video. I would say we're in the home stretch, but this may well be the longest part of it. So, let's get on with it. I love a rom-com. Hell, I even love a rom-com that could be seen as a little bit trashy, a little bit cheesy. So long as they remain good fun, that's alright with me. This book is supposed to be a rom-com, but I fail to find any enjoyment in the romance, and the only real comedy comes from the state of the writing. Now look, I don't want to come across like I'm some horrible little book reviewer. Especially later in the book, I did find things that I enjoyed. There were even refreshing aspects to this book. But it has been a while since I've had the urge to write down all my feelings about a book. Not just because I am passionate about a subject raised within it, as you saw with the first review here, but more because I just got annoyed. I felt it in my bones. The urge to write an incredibly detailed review to get all of those feelings out in a beautiful sense of catharsis. And I think it's going to be more enjoyable for me now because I get to say these things. So when I used to do Bad Reputation Book Club and I used to write those reviews, it felt good to get it off my chest, but the most cathartic thing came from while I was reading them, and I would send one particular friend voice notes of me yelling. Whereas I didn't have to do that this time because I knew at some point I would be able to say those words out loud. And God, does it feel so good. Now, I actually did think, oh, I should just try and get this over as quickly as possible at some point and get the audiobook. But I decided against it, thinking I could spend my Audible credit better elsewhere, because this is on reserve for a few months on BarBox. So I just couldn't. It is available on there, but it's not going to be available for a while, and I wasn't putting this video off any further. Please, no. But I am glad that I looked, because I got to find this absolute gem of a review. Because I got to find this absolute gem of a review, and I think the best place to start my review of this book is with somebody else's. I'm going to hold my script because the cat seems to be interested in it. Do you mind? Where are you going? Look, I don't think the shot looks different, but my cat just jumped up from the window to the bed, and I think the shot might look different because she knocked my tripod down a little bit. But it seems to be mostly the same. Here is an anonymous Audible user's review of The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. Please tell me the voice actress was well paid. Never have I had the distinct pleasure of being profoundly annoyed by every single character that's introduced. Could only bring myself to listen up to chapter 4 before the urge to throw my phone off the balcony became too real to ignore. Don't recommend unless you want to get angry. 10 out of 10 book to raise blood pressure in the least pleasant of ways. Must read if you truly hate yourself and have time to throw in the garbage. Now, I don't think I'm going to be quite as viciously harsh, but I hope that sets things up very nicely. Now, I won't quite be going chapter by chapter, and I also am not going to be entirely relaying the plot, but I am going to be going chronologically, breaking this down by the chapters that I did have notes on. I was going to do this fully like I used to do when I read books like this, but I've already put a lot of time into this, and I didn't want to put more effort into hating this book. So I figured the way I had it works well enough. Let's delve into my descent into madness. And you know what? Welcome to the first Bad Reputation book club of the Fall From Reality channel. Oh, why do I do this to myself? Autumn, you have better books you could be reading. Alright, let's give a little quick overview of the book, shall we? So, we have Lena. She needs a date to her sister's wedding. Her co-worker Aaron offers, but they have a weird relationship where they kind of don't like each other, but it's kind of obvious that they do, kind of thing. It's an enemies to lovers type deal. What starts with a will they be able to coexist becomes a ooh, there's something more between them kind of vibe. That's it. That's all you really need to know, because like I said, I'm going to be delving in a little bit further with my review. So let's just get into it. Chapter 1. Right out of the gate, I am met with an entirely unnecessary run-on sentence. I'm not saying you have to be snappy and quick right out of the gate. I'm not expecting you to give me it was the best of times, it was the worst of times with every single book. But I am saying that I'd like something that isn't an absolute mouthful. It's not just that it's a run-on sentence, it's that it's clunky and stodgy. It's just too much. For a start, it's a bold choice to start your book with that irritating of a run-on sentence, but also the grammar choices like that persist throughout the rest of the book. And yes, this is the kind of a lot of casual uses of grammar is the best way I will describe it. I don't mind that, sort of breaking single words into sentences that doesn't really make sense grammatically, but it makes sense stylistically. That doesn't bother me, but just breaking up your sentences is allowed. It's okay. You can do that sometimes. And a lot of romance authors have an issue with it, because a lot of them, I think, I mean, I can't guarantee this for Elena Armas, but what I've noticed is that a lot of romance authors are obviously fans of classics. Think Pride and Prejudice being the probably most obvious one. And, you know, the ultimate original enemies to lovers type thing. And I think that love of classic literature is often displayed in writing, and unfortunately, run-on sentences tend to be the thing that gets on my wick the most. Like I said, no real actual issue with run-on sentences. It's just when they're A, overused, and B, they just feel stodgy. Sometimes they get to this point where you're like, I don't understand what the actual sentence is that you're trying to say, because it's full of clauses and conjunctives and all that bollocks. And look, I got all the way to page 3 by the time I realised that I am not going to get along with Lena, which is a shame because she's the protagonist. Look, she's not entirely insufferable forever. I don't think it's that you warm to her or any of the other characters. I think that eventually you just don't notice how irritating they are anymore. Which, when talking about Bad Reputation book club reads, is actually quite a feat, because when I was reading 50 Shades, when I was reading, I know I never put that review out, but when I read New Moon in particular, way more than Twilight, when I read After, those characters, especially After, those characters remained irritating throughout the entire book. Whereas here, they're really irritating in the beginning, and eventually I just stopped caring that they're irritating. But I do think that if I wasn't reviewing this, her being as irritating as she is that early on, and like I said, the rest of the characters, but her being that main character makes it a problem that she's irritating. If I was just reading this for pleasure, this would be a book that I wouldn't finish, because she just annoyed the shit out of me. Now, I couldn't actually find out if this book started its life as fan fiction. From what I could tell, it was definitely self-published at first, and then got picked up by, I believe, Simon & Schuster for an audiobook, and then I can't remember the name of the publisher that picked it up for a paperback, or if it was still Simon & Schuster and then it got republished under somebody else. I believe Simon & Schuster is who published the version I had, but I can't remember. Not that important. It was picked up by a major publisher after being self-published, but what I don't know is if that means actually self-published, as in you have maybe written an ebook that you've then put up on somewhere like Amazon, or, and I know there are other ways of being self-published, but that was the first one that came to my head, or if self-published is a bit of a kind of, you know, yeah, she's self-published and actually just started out on like fanfiction.net. You know, it's kind of a PR team trying to distance themselves from the fanfiction roots, but I don't think you'd have to do that so much anymore, especially in this genre, so I assume she is just self-published. I don't just say that because of the type of book this is, because of the tropes that are used throughout, and I don't even say it because of where it picked up its popularity. A lot of the romance books that are big on TikTok did start out as fanfiction, I say it because of lines like this. My eyes travelled further up then, reaching his blue ones, blue that reminded me of the depths of the ocean, where everything is cold and deadly, finding them on me. Now for a start, that's what I mean about clunky sentences. It's just too much in one. Break it up a little bit. And I know that talking like that in romance fiction existed well before fan fiction overtly wormed its way into being published in the mainstream. But it's just lines like this, given the context of the type of trope being used, and a couple that are used later on, that just made me go, oh, was this fan fiction? And that's not always a bad thing. I had the same thing with, is it the Love Hypothesis? Which I found out today that there's another book called that. And because I just thought I'd seen that book with a different cover, because it's a really nice cover, the one that I saw today. And I was like about to send it to my friend, being like, oh my god, look at this new cover or whatever. And it's like, it's not the same book. Different book, same name. But anyway, when I was reading Ali Hazelwood's The Love Hypothesis, I was like, is that fan fiction? It does read a little bit like fan fiction. And I thought that book was perfectly fun. Not like the best book in the world, honestly. I probably would have said that I really enjoyed it at the time, but like, yeah, it was a good book, it was good fun. But I was like, this sounds like it might have been fan fiction, and I believe it was Star Wars fan fiction. Which makes me worried, because that gives me mad, oh no, I hope it's not Reylo vibes, but I'm now thinking about the way that the characters are described in that. Oh god, was it Reylo? Was that Reylo fan fiction? Oh no, I hope not. Anyway, let's get back to this. Look, just like I said, I don't know if this is fan fiction, but I do believe that. Look, where I'm coming from is that if this wasn't fan fiction, I have a heavy feeling in my heart that Elena Armas needs to put down AO3 and stop reading fanfiction, because I think it's showing up in her work, or she just needs to be reading better books, because if she's not reading fanfiction, I think she must be reading the published books that are fanfiction with the names changed kind of stuff, right? Moving on from that, to me, hissing sounds, as the word might suggest, have to be on sounds and not sounds. I don't think you can a hiss. Maybe that's just me. I say this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you can hiss the word sure. As in, I am sure of this. Sure meaning certain, kind of sure. S-U-R-E. Because I know the way I see it, it sounds a bit like seashore. Right? But either way, in my accent at least, they're pronounced the same. And I don't know if that's the reason why I'm missing this. Do some people say, oh, are you sure of this? Because I just don't feel that you can hiss sure. Can you hiss sugar? I mean, you can't hiss it unless you say it sure. And I don't think you can. So, I mean, I would be concerned if somebody started speaking like this. Oh, hello, sir. Are you sure you don't need any sugar? Hissing is one of those words that is misused all of the time, and not just in romance fiction, in loads of fiction, and it pisses me off to no end. It hisses me off. Even early on, when they're having their little back and forth, where Aaron the fake date to real boyfriend pipeline man here. He's like, hey, you need a date for this wedding, I will be that date. And she's like, does he mean it? He can't mean it. He's not the type of guy to say something like that. Oh my god. And then that kind of repeats and it gets tiring. You get dizzy from going round in fucking circles. And it's back and forth for chapters, by the way. Like, I put this in chapter 1. That back and forth goes on for so long until they finally agree. And it's just exhausting. It's part of this stubbornness that lives within both of the characters, but especially Lena, where it's not actual stubbornness, you're just being a pain for the sake of it. It's like, you don't have to be correct about 100% of everything he's offered, so I'm sure he means it when he says he'll take you. Why not just take him up on his offer if he's said it a million fucking times? I knew I was going to go off script so many times in this. I am waking up my cat and I feel a bit bad, but you know what? She knocked the tripod over earlier and she wakes me up in the middle of the night by I have a big stuffed penguin at the end of my bed, and occasionally when I'm trying to get to sleep I would just hear this yes, you little paw, thank you, can I hold your foot? As soon as I stand up I am banned. Squish 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 squish. Good cat. Of her just like violently making biscuits on this penguin and it looks like she's torturing him. So yeah, that's why I'm fine that I keep waking you up, because you are mean to me when I'm trying to get to sleep myself. Also, she's been scratching me in my sleep, so that's nice. Yeah, I got to the end of that chapter and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be such a long book. Because that was just the end of chapter 1. I don't know how long this video, this part of the video has been so far, but that was chapter 1. It's fun, isn't it? We're having a great time. I fucking am. Chapter 2. I watched his lips tip down as he pulled out a chair. Tip down. Now, there was only one thing I could think of when I was reading that. And that was I had to think fast because it sounded like he's having a stroke. That's what it came across like to me. I don't understand the tipping down of the lips. It's not... That to me says a child pulling a pretend sad expression or medical difficulties. Now, I didn't realise until putting my script together just how early this line was, because obviously by the time I got to the end of the book, it's hard to remember just quite where little details like this are. But this line sent me to a place of anger that I have not felt in so long. Reading one of these books, and that anger not only has lasted the entire time I was reading this book, but it has remained with me to this day. Now look, I know that so many not even just romance books, but books with a romance where the romantic interest is a man, that quite often you get talk of somebody's like hands, especially when they got quite like big hands. That's like quite a common thing, right? Fine. It's one of those things that's like tried and tested. People love to write about that. I'd assume, therefore, people love to read it. Elena romance is no different here. She talks about his big hands. Aaron is a big man. He's got big, broad shoulders. He's tall. He used to play American football. I don't know if they said which position he played, but I also don't. I know 2 positions in American football. I know quarterback, and I think the other one is a linebacker. I don't know any others. So I don't know anything about football. The only thing I know about football is there is a college in... Well, I can't remember which Carolina it is. I'm so sorry. But I will put it in here because my brain's forgetting because I'm so busy thinking about this and everything else, a million thoughts at once. But it has a beautiful mascot of the most haunted tiger man you've ever seen. And I love him so much because he's so threatening. I do love him very dearly. That's why I drew him in this very threatening manner, running to get you. Yes, you in particular. But anyway, back to the book. Like I said, Aaron is a big man. He's got big hands. Elena Armas talks about this. But she decided to be a little bit different. She decided to call them paw-sized hands. Paw-sized. Elena. Can I call you Elena? Elena, how many creatures in the great, wide and beautiful animal kingdom do you think have paws? I have 2 cats that don't even have the same sized paws. Because I know that you probably mean he's got big old meaty bear hands. He's got them Charlies going on. But I just need you to have a little bit of clarity sometimes. I know there's always show, don't tell, but you're showing me nothing and you're telling me nothing other than that you don't understand how animals work. Do you know what it's like reading the rest of this book, imagining this big, giant linebacker, quarterback, whatever he is, big fucking American football man with these tiny little kitten paws? Because that image came into my head. With his little hands, with his little paws, with a baby. Oh, my cat's looking at me because I'm using the baby voice. That's all I could think. What if he has tiny little kitten paws? And I was talking to one of the librarians at my local library about this book. Because they have a... Now, this wasn't from the library. I fucking paid for this. Anyway. Because there's a shelf at the library. It's like a little stand. Maybe... like... me high. I'm like 5 foot. It's maybe a bit taller than me. And it's got like no more than 10 books on it. It's like a little stand. It's not even a shelf. It's got like 10 books on there, but like popular on TikTok type stuff, because, you know, it's nice for people who can't necessarily buy these books to still be able to be up to date. That's grand. But I was talking about this because I was like, oh, I'm actually doing a video on a couple books that are big on TikTok. Don't read this one. Just don't. And I was telling her about this line because I think it was still relatively fresh with me at the time, but it possibly wasn't because, like I said, this stuck in my fucking head. Just right in there, stuck in my fucking head. And she was on exactly the same line that I had, because I said the line about paw-sized hands, and she was like, oh, like a little raccoon. He has little itty-bitty raccoon hands. So there were 2 thoughts, actually, in my head after I said that, about it. He's got these cute little kitten paws, or he's got nasty, still tiny, but little grabby hands, like raccoons do. Because they do, they've got those like nasty little hands and I love them, but like I don't want to be imagining that when I'm trying to imagine this like big guy. And I love a big man. There's a reason I watch pro wrestling. It's because there are big men with big titties and I love that. But I don't want to see Wardlow come out, but he's got these tiny little fucking raccoon hands, because that would make me sad. You know? That's such a horrible image. That's so horrible. Why did I do that to myself? Ugh. And then just as I was like, the first time I was reading it, I managed to calm myself down from my absolute vitriol over that line. I was confronted with, I couldn't be trusted to adult properly. Now listen, I'm in what feels like that sort of wasteland between being a millennial and being a Gen Z. I was born in 99, but I was also like, I'm also really working class, so I still had a lot of outdated technology, but we were still relatively up to speed with stuff. So like, I know, like, you know, we had a landline, we had dial-up, but I had a mobile phone when I was a kid, but it was like just a brain, just a regular phone. It wasn't like a smartphone or anything like that, right? But lines like, I couldn't be trusted to adult properly, they're what make me feel like, oh, maybe I am just a Gen Z. Because I know that, like, technically that's just what I am classified as, but I feel like, I think it's 97 to 99. It might be a bit before 97, it might be 95, 96. But there is that, like, middle ground of, you're kind of both, you're kind of neither. Lines like that, no, maybe I'm just Gen Z, and that's fine. I'm Team Zoomer. And I think maybe that was the same feeling I had when I was listening to this whole chat where they're talking like nerds do, bringing up people like Zayn Malik and D&D. D&D being the television creators, sorry, the creators of the Game of Thrones television series, not D&D like Dungeons and Dragons. But it's just, it feels so false. I mean, the adulting thing, yeah, I'm sure plenty of people do talk like that, but the D&D Zayn Malik chat, trust me, I could have written down that whole quote, but you don't deserve it. I think you deserve better than that. But it just feels so much like, yeah, I'd see this online, specifically I think on Tumblr, and specifically on Tumblr maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago. It feels fake and it feels outdated, and it just, for want of a better phrase, it's kind of cringe, bruh. So I've already mentioned that one of Lena's biggest irritating qualities is that she's got that specific brand of stubbornness. It's sort of beyond stubborn, you know, it's really petulant. That really showed when she's walking through the rain, she's soaked through. Aaron pulls over by her and she's like, I don't want to get in the car, I don't want to get in the car. I can walk, I can do it, I can walk, it's fine. So you're already soaked through, you might as well get in the car, just shop and get in the car. Oh my god, why is this an argument? Why is everything an argument in these books? And she just won't accept this ride from Aaron, and it's just, yeah, I wrote a side note in my script deck because I couldn't work out if I'd mentioned that he's the one with the tiny kitten paws, but I have gone off my script a few times enough that I think, yeah, you know that Aaron is the eventual boyfriend, mostly fake date guy, and he has tiny little hands, little baby hands. But in this scene, her petulance isn't the biggest annoying factor. The biggest annoying factor is when she gets in the car and Aaron responds with, "Thank you," he answered, delivering that "you" with sarcasm, "for not making me get out and carry you inside myself." Okay, Christian Grey, fucking pipe down. It's just a ball bag kind of move. Now, he's not like that for pretty much any other part of the book. He's not got that, like, power fantasy thing going on for the most part. And the power thing he has is very much something that they both seem to go with and enjoy, rather than it being a, you know, for not making me get out and carry you inside myself. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? Fuck off. That line really annoyed me, and I was really worried that it was going to become a bit more like he's really domineering, but thankfully, not so much. Sorry, there was a moth smacking itself against the window there. But I will say, I am actually a fair reviewer, and this book wasn't 100% dog shit. When they're in the car, Lena is like right up against the front of the seat because she's like, it's a really expensive, nice car. She soaked through and she's like, I don't want to ruin these seats. I don't want to ruin these seats. And like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But at some point, Aaron has to make a really sudden stop, and because she's like right far forward, and I don't know if it's clear if she's actually got a seatbelt on or not, but I think even if she did, it wouldn't matter because she's so far in front, like at the front of the seat, and when he makes a sudden stop, she's lurched forward, and he has to like put an arm across her, and like it's across her collarbones, so he stops her, like slamming her face on the dashboard. And then he just really gently tells her, it's fine. You can sit back. You're not going to ruin the seats. It doesn't matter that you're soaked through. And he puts the heated seats on, and it's nice and it's comforting for her. And it's just quite a nice scene. It's a really basic scene, but it's one of those where it's like, if this was in a different book where I cared about the characters present, this would have been one of those moments where they're like in those really early stages of getting to know each other. Well, getting to know each other better, because they've already known each other for a bit with them being co-workers, but they're like actually getting to know each other as people, not just like coexisting in the same space. Though I do think it's funny that right after I wrote all these notes about, you know, this really nice scene, I'm being really pleasant, I'm a good reviewer, immediately afterwards it's just the line, shut up about his fucking eyes. If you need a big like hydration sesh, read this book, and every time she talks about his eyes, take a shot of water. I will not say do the drinking game where you take a shot of booze every time she talks about his eyes, because you will die. Chapter 6. I did enjoy the, like, mouth goes before brain has the chance to catch up moment, where at the end of her saying something to him, she calls him big boy. Because there's this moment where she says it and she's immediately just like, oh no. It's like a really classic rom-com moment, and I like the way it's brought back up in the future. Do you ever read something? I believe this is what is known as purple prose, where something is just over-described. No, I think purple prose is where that's like excessive. In this case, it's just like a few times where you get it, where it's just like, you could have just used one word when you used about 6 or 7. So in this case, we have a colour somewhere between black onyx and midnight blue. Navy. Pretty sure that's navy. And if I'm wrong, just say a deep blue-black. People know what you mean. A lot of this book is either over-descriptive or under-descriptive. She very rarely, for the most simple things as well, she very rarely gets it right. On one side of the spectrum, we have a colour somewhere between black onyx and midnight blue. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have poor-sized hands. in this case, with the slight over-explanation, and I know it's not a lot, but it's just enough that it makes you sound pretentious. It's like, just say blue-black, just say navy blue, or even midnight blue, because it probably is just midnight blue. People know what you mean. Or compare it to something. I think that often sounds better than trying to do the Pantone fucking colour chart. Chapter 8. TJ, or so Aaron had called him, nodded. There's no revelation about this guy's name. His name's TJ. Probably his initials. It's just a really weird way of phrasing it. Do you ever wonder if somebody, like, had a word count, even just a self-imposed word count that they're really trying to hit? Because that's what I sound like when I'm writing essays and I need to, like, pad it out a little bit. So there's this bit where TJ is talking to Aaron and Lena. The two of them are at this big fancy charity function, and they are basically, this is like the pre-fake date before the main event. This is for Aaron instead. And basically, she's really over-explaining what's going on between them. And it's like, you know that bit in The Emperor's New Groove with the poison for Cusco? It's a little bit like one of those, but it goes on for like just too long, where she's explaining and explaining and explaining, and it could be funny, but then it keeps fucking going and going and going. Now, I don't like, and obviously it creates this really awkward, like, tension, and I don't always really like super awkward comedy, but I understand that it can be fun. But here, it got to this point where it was like, this could be funny if you like that, and then it keeps going and keeps going, and it's like, stop it, get your hands away from the keys. But like I said, this is like a really big charity event. It's black tie, it's real nice, and obviously everybody's dressed to the nines. Aaron is in the distracting tux that hung on his body like a glove. Now, this might be petty, but I don't think gloves hang. Listen, it might be an overused kind of phrase, but you could say it fit him like a glove, but I don't know about it hanging like a glove. Also, I don't think nice looking clothes often hang. Now, obviously, British slang, if you say, oh my god, that's hanging. I don't know if that's British or Northern, but if you said, oh my god, that's absolutely hanging, it's gross, right? But that's not what I did think about that a little bit. But like, for something to hang on you, it feels like either it's too loose and draping. Like, I would say this hangs down, right? It's big sleeve. So it's either too loose, or it's like the opposite and it's hanging on to you, like it's clinging. Either way, it's not good. And I think a line like that in a decent book probably wouldn't be spotted quite as easily, or it would be one of those where you go, oh, that's a bit silly, but you'd be able to pass it off because you know that you're going to get onto good stuff soon. But because you don't know you're going to get onto good stuff soon, you spot shit like that really easily in here. It's a little bit like it starts off in a kind of, oh, we're going to have one or two bad lines, but it picks up. Because I've certainly had books like that where you get a bit of a bad first impression, but once you stick with it a little bit, you realise, oh, okay, it's just like, maybe that could have done with some editing or something. But here, it's more like it's gathering a lot of little bad lines, so much so that it becomes this book full of them, and it's just full of shite, like the garbage island in the sea, and it's just floating around, gathering more shit. However, from the moment they start actually dancing, through to, I would say, the end of the chapter, it's actually pretty good scene. It read like something from a better book. There was this tension slowly building, and then it's like pulled away at just the right moment, and that's something that reoccurs in her good scenes most of the time. This ability to build tension and then pull it away, because this is a real slow burn type book. But for a start, it's a shame that it has to be in this book, because it is a good scene, and it would be nice if it was surrounded by other good scenes. But also, it begs a question, and I think I've spoken about this before when I've complimented scenes in bad books, where you read a scene like that and then you go, oh, so you can write well? So what was the problem before? When you display that you actually know how crafting stories works, what's the excuse for every other part of this book? Chapter 15. Aaron's fingers found my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. Couple notes on this. 1. Patronising. 2. Why did he have to find her chin? Is it particularly small? Is he in need of some spectacles? And look, yes, I know it's actually his fingers finding her chin, but it still just sounds a bit silly. Why would, when you say they find it, it implies that they were having to search in the first place. So was he just like feeling around her face until they, oh, there it is, and then tilts her up? And also, yeah, patronising. It doesn't help that there's like, unsurprisingly, height difference between the two of them. I think she's like 5'3", 5'4", and he's a little over 6 foot. So like obviously he's then like up, and it's like, listen, I get it, I get the idea of a height difference, but short person sometimes need to just write things where they're with a normal sized person, because they need to learn that shit like this is weird. People who write fiction where there is a huge height difference, and this is men and women. I don't think I've ever read anything by somebody non-binary that features a romance, but this is the sort of stuff that's written by men and women who are writing height difference romances. So whether it's from the point of view of the woman or from the point of view of the man, because women usually do pick a female POV and men usually write male POV, makes sense. But people who write height differences often do accidentally fall into like being really patronising and infantilizing, because they like the power dynamic that the height difference can create. And sometimes I'm like, if you're writing somebody who's like 5 foot tall, just write them with somebody who's like 5'8", because by the way, somebody who's 5'8" is tall enough. They can reach the top shelf at Tesco. And by the way, if you're 5'1", that's all you need. And if you're in your own house, you have a stepladder. If you don't, get one, trust me. But by this point in the book, they are actually in Spain for Lena's sister's wedding. The whole reason for the name of the book, The Spanish Love Deception. And I think that phrase is used like 3 or 4 times as well. And it's like, don't use the name of the book in the book itself. I think it's cringe. Maybe once or twice. Especially once, because sometimes it's like, oh, maybe that's actually how you got the name of the book. You wrote that line and was like, oh, that actually works really well. Fine. Makes sense. But when you use it over and over again, it's like, look, that's the name. That's the name of the book. Look, the name of the book. Stop it. Hands off the keys. But yeah, they're in Spain for the wedding. And they're supposed to be in separate rooms. And one of them has a slightly smaller bed and one of them has a slightly bigger bed. I think one of them's a single. Is a single and a twin the same thing? A single bed and a twin bed? I think they say it's a twin bed. One of them's a smaller bed, one of them's a bigger bed, and both of them are like, no, I'll just take the small bed. Let me take it. And there's a bit of back and forth between them, where she's like, you are not going to fit in this, you are too big for this bed. And it's actually one of the very few times when the two of them being really stubborn leads to something funny, because there's a bit of a mishap where he's like too big and he gets on the bed, and I can't remember exactly how it goes down, but at some point, A, the bed is broken, and B, she's trying to help him up and ends up sort of on him. And it's funny, and like then the cousin walks in, and obviously she's like, oh, christening the room this quickly, are we? Lena's being really like awkward about it because it's her, and Aaron is remaining pretty cool and calm, and it's a funny scene. The issue is, one, we're stuck with the, like, no, there's only one bed trope, which is not tried and tested, it's tired and tested. I know it's one of those that a lot of people like, they think it's fun, so they're happy when it shows up, but for me, that's just one of those, it's like, can we not? Could you not think of something else? The other thing is that Lena's, like, facing away from the door where the cousin walks in. She like doesn't want to look at her because she's like bright red and embarrassed, and this is the type of cousin who's like, when she knows something, everybody knows something. Aaron, in one of his kind of domineering kind of things, but it's like, okay, because he's bigger than her so he can move her, it's like a bit patronizing, but it's like one of those things where I'm like, maybe other people like this, I just think it's a bit patronizing. But he picks her up a bit and then like puts her, bear in mind they're both like just sat on the broken bed, they're on the floor effectively, but he's like puts her, they're both sat up with her on his lap, like, so he just picks her up and just, so she sat like this, which again, like I say, patronising, but that's not my biggest issue here. She starts like, you know, she's awkward and embarrassed, so she starts like wriggling. Is there dust on this? Gross. So she starts like, you know, wriggling on his lap. And obviously he, you know, responds. Frankly, one of my issues with that is I don't understand how you don't expect that. Even if you don't think somebody is actively into you, if you're going to sit on somebody's penis and grind on it, effectively, because she's awkwardly shuffling like this and grinding on it, yeah, they're probably going to be like, you know, that is very much known as, you know, that is, you know, that's very much one of those parts of the anatomy that kind of has a mind of its own. Yeah, it's going to pop off the moment you start moving on it. Also, what it made me realise, and I think the reason that this scene sat with me in a particular way, was it made me realise, oh, there is actually going to be a sex scene in this, because some of these books, they stick to saucy, but then a kind of novel equivalent of a tasteful fade to black. Some of them, it's all out. With this one, full sex scene. And I realised at this moment, and I was like, oh no, I don't like that. I was worried about it, but actually, spoiler alert, it's not written badly, to be honest. It's not awkward or cringy, so there's that at least, because it could have been much worse. Chapter 16. So there's like a minor dick swinging contest between Aaron and Lena's ex, Daniel, who's there. I actually don't think I mentioned that earlier during the plot synopsis, which I think I was supposed to, but basically her ex is there, and a big reason that she was like, I need a fake date to come to this wedding is because A, he was going to be there, and B, he was supposedly bringing his current fiance or partner at least, right? And there was a bit of like, I need to make sure that my family isn't like, oh my god, isn't it sad that you're like still single and can't get over this man and he's like living his life, right? But he doesn't even bring up, but yeah, that's why she brings Aaron in the first place. And yeah, this is a bit of like a minor dick swinging contest between the two of them, and thankfully it's nothing too egregious. And also, thankfully, I was wrong when I put in my notes that, oh god, this is going to be what it's like for the rest of the novel. Thankfully, it's not. There isn't really any confrontation between them. You know, there's no moment where one of them throws a punch or something like that, which is where I really did think that was going to go. It's just really common in books like this for like two blokes to like try and outman each other because there's a lady present, and it's just like, fuck off. It generally comes with like this feeling of, oh, neither the characters here or the author who wrote them have any sense of awareness. But in some cases, Elena Almas has some awareness, clearly. Now, I think it is in this chapter, I'm pretty sure anyway that it's in this chapter where we first find out that Daniel is not only her ex, but was also her university professor when they were together. Like, it certainly surprised me when she said that in this chapter, but it could be, like, easily one of those little lines that you don't remember everything, right? I was like, well, wait, hang on, what? And it's not really addressed much here, but it is addressed later on, so we will talk about that more when we get to it. Now, just looked at my script and I had to remember what I looked at. God, right. So if the paw-sized hands line made me aggressive, if the paw-sized hands line made me aggressive, this line is gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm just gonna read it. Like, I didn't even... Usually when I write quotes, I put like a little note afterwards, even if it's just a little thing to expand on when I'm actually reviewing it. I didn't even do that here. I just put a little sad face. So this isn't right at the beginning of the sentence, but this is the only part that you need. As if he hadn't just made parts of my body dissolve into goo I didn't know what to do with. You know what? You can have that one more time. One more time. As if he hadn't just made parts of my body dissolve into goo I didn't know what to do with. Goo. You know, one more time? Just to make sure you've got this, right? Because I had to read it in the context of reading the rest of this book. So you're going to have to listen to that line again. As if he hadn't just made parts of my body dissolve into goo I didn't know what to do with. Yeah. I think you've had it enough there. Comedy comes in threes, so... Chapter 19. There was actually just a good long while where I was actually enjoying myself reading this book. I mean, shocker, I know, enjoying a book that you've bloody paid to read, but basically from the point where Lena's sister is like, oh my god, tell me everything about how you two met, up to, the end of chapter 19, I was just having a good time enjoying this book like I would enjoy others. And maybe, actually, I say up to the end of this chapter, if not like a little bit past that. I mean, a lot of the writing up until this one scene right at the end of the chapter, it's like standard rom-com writing. But standard is fine, because standard isn't bad. And sometimes that's what I look for. I think especially with a lot of books like this, rom-coms and romance fiction and just chick lit in general, right? I read it a lot of the times not because I think it's going to be like groundbreaking and the next War and Peace. I read it because I want to have fun, and even the most standard books in this genre are often fun. And reading what Elena Romas can do, which is write pretty standard rom-com stuff. It's just like, where was this in the rest of the book? It's just, you know, there's this like real nice rise and fall in tension, and you get to see those little moments where Lena goes from, I am not attracted to this man. Okay, maybe I am a little bit because he's quite handsome, to, oh no, I'm definitely into this guy, and oh no, maybe he's into me. There's a thing between us going here. Oh word, the thing that you're looking for when you're reading Enemies to Lovers. When you read a book like that, it's not, and with fake dating as well, because obviously this is both, but you don't read those books for will they get together. You read those books for the when will they notice what the reader's noticing, and this is like the part of the book where you really start to spot that. However, towards the end of this chapter, there's a whole scene that's like saucy, erring towards not safe for work. There's no actual sex, but it's like sexy and sexually. It's not safe for work, but it's not like full frontal kind of thing, right? But I have this pet peeve with anybody who writes not safe for work scenes, and that is, I am begging you to stop saying that characters fist fabric. Anywhere else, I just get to be a little bit childish and be like, hoo, you said fist the fabric, ooh, fisting the fabric, that's funny. If you're writing a not safe for work scene, you know that the word fisting has a double meaning, and you have to be careful with things like that. Stop it. This is not just at Elena Romas, this is everybody who says it. Just stop it. Think about what you're writing. But double meanings aside, that final scene is actually really well written. Like, from the point where he tells her to close her eyes right through to the end of the chapter, it just works really well. It's that thing that I was talking about earlier, where that tension gets built and built and built, and it's snatched away at just the right moment before something actually happens. In this case, like, there's a lot of things where he's like kissing a lot of other parts of her body, but he doesn't kiss her lips yet, and it's like, and she's got her eyes closed the whole time. There's like a bit of a dominance thing going on, not like kinky, but in like a E.L. James probably does wish she'd written a scene like this kind of way, you know. It's still got that side to it, but, you know, that tension is rising. It's got that heat that you want from these sorts of scenes. It works really well. It's one of those where it's like, and when that tension's snatched away, you're like, oh no, I wanted more from this, because that's like what that's the point. But the issue comes from, it's hard to be, for want of a better phrase, into scenes like that when you're not that interested in the characters, because the point of writing any kind of saucy, not safe for work scenes in books like this is that you've spent so long feeling like one character and feeling like you want the other character. So then you read this scene and it's like, yeah, I'm into this because I want to be one of them in this scene. And it's like, I'm not feeling that because I don't give a shit about these people. I don't know how you're supposed to, because they're irritating as shit, right? And I'm not saying that I didn't want, like I said, I wanted them a tiny bit. But it's less, I just stopped giving a shit that they're annoying. It's more that I stopped giving a shit that they're annoying, I mean. But it is what it is. Chapter 21. Fuck's sake. I was sure something had... Oh, fucking hell, fam! I was sure something had just popped in the vicinity of my female reproductive parts. First the goo, now this. Catalina, Lena, Catalina, please, I am begging you, just go to a gynecologist. You sound like you desperately need this. This is some fucking Belinda Blinked bullshit. Rocky Flintstone, eat your heart out. Jesus Christ. Moving on to compliments. Because, you know, I give them more and more towards the end of this. One thing that I did appreciate, that at least for the majority of the book, I have mentioned a few other areas where it might seem a bit different. She gets it right with Aaron for the vast majority of the book. That she gets it right that he is protective and he is not possessive. That isn't something that you see often enough in romance fiction. Like I said, there are some patronising moments. There's the moment in the car, but for the most part, while I haven't noted it every time, he is actually more protective than possessive, and I genuinely really appreciate that, because not most, but a fair amount of romance authors don't get that balance right. So it's towards the end of this chapter where we come back to the fact that Daniel, Lena's ex, was also her university professor. Now, apparently, at her university, there's no rule against students and tutors seeing each other, being in a relationship. Now, I personally don't feel comfortable enough emailing one of my old tutors being like, hey, by the way, you know what, uni, is there like a rule against this? Because it would make it sound like I was trying to cover something up, and I'm like, no, I swear it's for a book I'm reviewing. Like, it just didn't sound right. But it's one of those things where I'm like, alright, fine, maybe I can suspend my disbelief enough for this story to work, because it's just like, it's something here nor there, but it's one of those things that stuck out to me. I was like, the fact that there's no rule against it. The expedition dump itself is actually pretty good. Sometimes actually just getting it all out in one go is the right thing to do, but it has to be done in the right moment, and it is here, because it's basically Lena being like, I have a lot of feelings that I need to get off my chest, and I'm going to get them all out now, kind of thing, and that works. I particularly liked the way it's talking about the way that women are the ones that get named and shamed when it comes to... Basically, it comes out that this guy is dating one of his students, and she's like, oh, she's just sleeping with him to get better grades and all that sort of stuff. Like, he's the dirty pervert who's in a position of power, and I don't care that their feelings are apparently real. He's a dirty little pervert. You're her fucking professor. She is one of your students. You are disgraceful to me. Sorry. But basically she then ends up going on this like long thing of like basically getting blamed for everything, and it's just like, oh no, great, I'm stuck with this now. And she is still kind of stuck with it even when she goes back into her village. Chapter 22. The "this is real" moment is written really well. Like with the scene at the end of chapter 19, you've got that really nice rising tension, snatched away at the right moment, playing into the fact that this book is a real slow burn, and also it's got that heat that you're looking for, that passion in scenes like this, right? I like the way that Elena Almas knows that she's writing something that's slow burn, and plays into that at every opportunity. Chapter 23. It was so refreshing to read a awful book where the author at least knows where it's appropriate for her characters to lower their voice. Also, she knows the difference between lowering one's voice, murmuring, mumbling, and whispering, because you have no clue the amount of books I have read that are these, like, usually YA, but not always YA books where everybody mumbles and murmurs. Actually, it's not just that. It's fanfiction books, you know what I mean by this, where they do this shit. Fucking 50 Shades is so bad for it, especially the murmuring. E.L. James loves the words murmur and murmuring, and everybody murmurs because it's sexy, they're talking low and no, it just means nobody can fucking hear each other. It's also during this chapter where we get the actual sex scene. There is only the one as far as I remember, and there's something quite gentle about it, quite sweet. I particularly appreciate the fact that throughout, Aaron is checking in kind of thing, making sure that she's comfortable with everything, making sure that this is what she wants, especially given the reluctance throughout the relationship together. Like, I don't mean their romantic or sexual relationship, like the entire time they've known each other, she's been quite aggy towards him. And so obviously he's like really making sure now that they are actually together, making sure that this is something that she really wants, that it's not just something else. There's a lot of checking in, and I think that's quite nice. It's quite refreshing. Now, there are actually about 5 or so chapters after 23. I think there's like just under 30. But there wasn't really anything of note for me, apart from there was one scene with like her shitty sexist co-worker where there's like a bit of a he's being shitty and sexist, and it kind of gets dealt with. And one of the few times where I actually cared about this character was when she's like trying to stop Aaron doing anything about it, because she just feels like it's gonna be a repeat. It's going to feel like a repeat of what happened after her and Daniel broke up. I thought that was quite good. I actually cared about her character for a brief moment. It took me right until the end of the fucking novel, but, you know, I got there. Frankly, this book is just really disappointing. It felt like it should be a book that I'd really enjoy. I had wanted to read this book outside of this TikTok video. And, yeah, frankly, I'm in a bit of a mood about it. I'd seen it, I think I had seen it online, but I'd also seen it in my library, and I'd seen it at, we've got quite a big book selection at my local Tesco, and I usually have a little look around, and it looked like the sort of, like, easy, summery kind of rom-com read that I would get a little bit of fun out of. Shame, really, isn't it? We just have annoying characters, we have overused tropes that are just a bit tired. Like I said, I have no problem with using tropes. I don't mean the enemies to lovers, the fake dating. I mean things like there's only one bed, boring, do something else. And it's just flat out bad writing so often. Think about the pause, think about the goo, think about the reproductive area, or whatever that fucking quote was. It's just, I wouldn't wish this book on anyone. Now, to the one friend who I have, just today actually, the day of filming this, posted this book to, by the time you see this, you may well have started it. I don't know, you should be getting it soon enough for you to have at least started it, maybe even finished it. I know you're quite a fast reader. I am not sorry that I'm making you read it, because you made me read Ice Planet Barbarians, and I think you deserve this. Just frankly, this book was exhausting to read. I had tension headaches throughout. I went through so much caffeine because I could hear the help with the headaches. And I just, usually at the end of my reviews, I'm like, here, do I recommend this, do I not? But if you can't tell whether or not I recommend this, go back to the beginning of the review here and watch it again. Give me more watch time and watch it as many times as you need to try and be able to tell. But And what I also do, because I have made this an official member of the Bad Reputation Book Club, is I discuss whether or not it deserves its bad reputation, because I have actually seen people talk about this both very positively and very negatively. This seems to be another one of those books where it's got very few people who just go, yeah, I thought it was alright. People who talk about this tend to have my sort of opinion or that like rabid love for it. So this is a Bad Reputation Book Club read, and the whole point of Bad Reputation Book Club was to discuss whether or not the books featured deserve the reputation that they have. And in this case, yes, it fucking does. It sucks. It sucks so bad. I hate it so much. It is rare that I actually hate a book. Like, frankly, I hate 50 Shades of Grey, but it's been like, quite frankly, I hated 50 Shades of Grey, but it's been so long now, I just think it's like laughably bad, and eventually I'll get there with this. The only book that I think that's where I'll get with this book. I think I'll get to that point where I'm like, oh, this is just bad. Ugh, kind of wish I hadn't read it. But right now, I'm angry about it. The only book, I think, in Bad Reputation Book Club that I still have outward seething vitriol towards is After by Anna Todd, because it's a load of hogwash I want to put in the sea and just drown it. Anyway, shall we wrap this up? Get to the end of this video. I'm not saying never listen to TikTok recommendations. I don't know, maybe just avoid romance and rom-coms, because they're the ones that seem to be the most divisive, so it seems like they may be the ones that might give you the most trouble as to what you should believe. You know, One Last Stop was apparently really big on TikTok as well, but I'm still haunted by the two of them shagging on a train. Ugh, gross. And I liked most of that book, but that scene ruined it entirely for me. And I think, so, I don't really watch TikTok, but I do watch some reels, because it's like easy, mindless scrolling. Same with YouTube Shorts. It's why I don't get TikTok, because it would just be 3 apps where I just sit and do this. It's not good for my ADHD brain to just be able to like mindless scrolling. Really doesn't help the fact when I'm sat there going like, I need to get up. I need to go and do things. It's fine. I'll like 5 more videos. I'll set myself 5 more videos. Alright, let's do another one. I'll be fine. No, they're bad for me. But generally, I think with any social media, you can kind of cater your... I don't know if cater is the right word, but you can sort of sort what you're watching to fit you a little bit better. So I think when you're going through book talk, see what else they've spoken about. See if they've spoken about books that you've read. See if they agree or disagree with you. And if they generally kind of agree with you, and I'm not saying, you know, only live inside the bubble of where everybody agrees with you, but if you're looking for book recommendations, maybe see the way they talk about books and see if that gels with the way that you feel about these books. Or if they do disagree, see if it's the sort of thing that you go, oh yeah, I do actually understand that, and they have a nuanced way of talking about books. I will listen to them in the future. Try and maybe follow them a bit more. Also, I would recommend, rather than, because you see it a lot, these like, here's 5, that you get a book haul and they're like, love it, hate it, love it, hate it, and it's just stacked up. Maybe try and avoid those videos, because yeah, fine, it's like a quick little snappy, here I like this, here I don't like this, here I like this, here I don't like this, but maybe, what, TikTok is like 3 minutes now, maybe try to find the videos where it's somebody talking about 1 or 2 books for the whole video, rather than, you know, I don't know, let's find a book on here or something. Where it's just like, Are you snoring? You know, they'll just hold up a book and go, I love it, and then that's the video. It's like 5 seconds long. Yes, this is the 2000 Star Wars Phantom Menace souvenir book, but the annual. Do they still make annuals like that? I hope so. But anyway, you know, like I said, find maybe the long form content on TikTok if that is where you're going to get your book recommendations from. So that is the end of our big old TikTok book review video. Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout this. I know this is going to be a really long video, but it is worth it. I think you get a lot of bang for your buck in this video. This isn't me waffling in the way that I did with a lot of my early videos. I just have one last favour to ask you before I go, and that is that at the time of me writing the script for this, I have a grand total of 27 subscribers. I know, I'm a tiny little channel. My goal for the end of the year is to try to get minimum of 50. My big goal was 100, but I'm not going to aim for that until I've got to 50. It's that, you know, baby steps is where I'm at the minute. I'm a tiny channel. I'm not aiming for huge steps. I'm not aiming for leaps and bounds. Baby steps. I want to try to get to 50 or 100. If you could just, you know, subscribe, tickle the little bell, that would be great. Also, I think what's going to really help me at the moment is that my Twitter it'll be in the description. It always is. If you can go to the tweet, which will be linking this video, right, the video tweet, pop that a little like, pop that a little retweet. It would be very much appreciated, and I do think it will give me a lot of help. By the time you're seeing this, it'll be about a week and a half away from where I'm actually sitting and filming. So what I'm gonna do now is, I think I'm gonna go and wash my face, I'm gonna go and get a shower, and then I'm gonna go to bed, because I've got a long road of editing in front of me. We're probably talking 2 or 3 hours worth of footage. So that's gonna be fun. I don't know how long this video will be by the time I'm finished, but Lord knows you will not see half as much, I imagine, that's actually that there is of raw footage. So yeah, I deserve to get clean and rested. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourselves. Don't read garbage books. Right.